Hey guys, Paulus and Ramos, and unfortunately, another week, another loss for Miami Dolphins. Their record goes down to 1-2 after the first 3 weeks, losing their first road game in Seattle. One of the toughest games for the Dolphins in terms of travel. They're not going to have any of those international games this year, so definitely one of the longest road trips for them. And the result was not great given the circumstances. Without Tua in the lineup, you can kind of expect something like this to happen, a loss for the Miami Dolphins. But a loss in the manner of which they suffered it, 3-24 with Seattle coming out on top there. Not so good. So without further ado, let's get into the post-game review. Oh boy, it was a tough watch, honestly. Skylar Thompson was like a deer in headlights. He just sat there in the pocket and did not expect pressure, and just a lot of his throws were subpar. And then on top of that, he just did not deal with the pressure coming his way. Not so great. He didn't get the ball out of his hands efficiently and fast enough. Was waiting for like these home run reads when you just need to get the ball out of your hands. You can't just be a sitting duck back there. And unfortunately, that's what he was. The Dolphins only got 13 first downs to Seattle's 21. Third down efficiency, Dolphins were 1 of 12 and 0 for 3 on fourth down. The Seattle Seahawks, on the other hand, were 3 of 11. Not so much better. The defense played really well for the Dolphins. But they didn't have to go for it on fourth down at all, so it was 0 for 0 on that one. Dolphins had 56 total plays to Seattle Seahawks 60. Dolphins had 205 total yards of offense. The Seattle Seahawks had 370. Let's see what else we can really highlight for teams stuff. Red zone getting in the end zone / appearances. Dolphins were 0 for 2. Seattle was 2 for 2. And then when we talk about penalties, it really felt one-sided for the most part. And then at the end of the game, turns out the penalties were even worse in terms of Seattle's favor. So in terms of penalties, Dolphins had 11 penalties for 85 total yards. Seattle Seahawks had 11 penalties for 92 total yards. It honestly didn't feel like that, but I think it's more of the losing mindset. Like the Dolphins just weren't playing well, and it just felt like everything was going against them. One thing I really want to talk about is the referees. So these referees kept on, like, Dolphins, finally found a groove at some point in the game. They were trying to go down the field and get some fast tempo offense going, and then here's the ref just, no, he can't play yet, dude. We're trying to go. Our job is not to wait on you. So that really, really, really boiled my blood when I was watching that. Aside from that, time of possession, Dolphins had 28 minutes and 32 seconds. Seattle Seahawks had 31 minutes and 28 seconds. Let's just get straight into the highlight really quick, and then we'll really dive into some stats and just thoughts on what happened in this matchup. So without further ado, let's get into these highlights. All right, so early on in the game, Geno finds Tyler Lockett here just sitting in a zone, just waiting for something to just come his way. And then, Dolphins stepped up big time on defense, got a sack there, and forced Seattle to take a long field goal, which they sank. And then Achane got involved early. Achane was one of the more key contributors for this Dolphins offense early on in this game, and pretty much all throughout the game. Jalen Wright got some touches early on in this game. This could have been called a horse collar if we really want to be nitpicky here. But look at this catch by DK Metcalf on Kendall Fuller. It's so good. You got to see it multiple times. The presence of mind to get both feet in bounds and just, totally moss him. That would help Zach Charbonnet get into the end zone to get Seattle a 10-0 lead. And it's not looking good here for Skylar. Muffing the snap a bit. And then he's about to get pressure from, I think, his boy Moffitt. And then he just drops the ball. Luckily, Teron Armstead had the presence in mind of getting on top of it. Glorious moment here for Kader Kohou and the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins are getting pressure on Geno Smith. Honestly, in hindsight, probably a safety would have been best here. But the Dolphins get prime field position after the Geno Smith interception. Unfortunately, only led to the 3 points that the Miami Dolphins scored in this matchup. Following drive for Seattle, DK Metcalf, a 50-plus yard bomb on the Miami Dolphins secondary. Man, it sucked to see that after how good the defense had been playing up to that point. And then Skylar Thompson and Jalen Waddle probably had the best connection of all the players in terms of Skylar Thompson, two players. Aside from that, HN, making some good headwing here, but it just wasn't enough offensively. I feel like the play calls were kind of a bit scattered. Defensively, the boys were on point. Zach Sealer getting a sack there. This was shortly before the half ended, and, Braxton Berrios setting up the Dolphins with good field position. I believe this was like a 50-plus yard return. I thought, this would bring some life to the Miami Dolphins offense. Unfortunately, nope, no chance. And then Jalen freaking Ramsey. I've never seen a corner love tackling so much as Jalen Ramsey loves it. This was in the second half. Skylar Thompson takes a big hit here, and you'll see more later about this. But moving on back towards the defense, and Calais Campbell getting the shoestring sack on Geno Smith. Love to see that. Calais Campbell, old soul, but still making some big-time plays. And, this was one of the final plays we saw from Skylar, finally connecting with Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill had a very, very bad game. But this was the play that took Skylar Thompson out, but I don't think it was that. I think it was the previous sack where, he landed pretty hard on his ribs. We'll talk about more of that later. But yeah, Seahawks moving down the ball, down the field. But the big tip by Calais Campbell ends up in Zach Sealer's hands. Man, oh man, Zach Sealer, I love when last year he got a pick six against the Tennessee Titans, and that was a big one. That was so fun to watch. But big on him. And how about Doyle here connecting with Jonnu Smith? Dolphins ended up getting in the red zone here after this Julian Hill reception. And to no avail, Dolphins went for it on fourth down. And I understand you're down by a lot at this point. You just got to go for it. And then Zach Charbonnet gets into the end zone to make it a 24-3 game. Very, very unfortunate what happened on this day for the Miami Dolphins, going down to 1-2, 0-1 on the road, and Seattle improved to 3-0, 2-0 at home. Seattle looked all right. I think the defense for the Dolphins was like spectacular in this matchup. They did exactly what was needed of them, and they forced 2 turnovers. They kept on getting in Geno's face. Like, Geno had a very, very uncomfortable matchup. Aside from like some of the stats that he put up, he did not have himself a pleasant day at the office, but man, it's upsetting. It wasn't that I was full on expecting the Dolphins to go in there and kick Seattle's ass, but I was expecting a little bit more of a competitive edge by the Dolphins, and that was what was lacking for me, and it was very upsetting to just see this performance by the Miami Dolphins. But let's talk about some stats, and then we'll go over, what happened to the keys to victory for the Dolphins team. All right, so first and foremost, let's talk about Skylar Thompson. He went 13 of 19, 107 yards. He was sacked 5 times for a loss of 37 total yards. And then Tim Boyle came in, I want to say in the third quarter, late third quarter, if not fourth quarter. He went 7 of 13, 79 total yards. He got sacked once for a loss of 9 yards. And then Geno Smith, on the other hand, went 26 of 34, 289 yards. He had 1 touchdown, which was a DK one, 2 interceptions, and both were tip balls. So, I really wish there was like a subcategory for interceptions, and it was like, quarterback threw it straight into the defender's hands, and then other like sub interceptions, and it was like ball tipped. It wasn't 100% on their fault. But he's also sacked 3 times for a loss of 19 total yards. I loved those sacks. I loved those interceptions. I think those were big-time plays by the Miami Dolphins defense. The offense, on the other hand, not so much. Dolphins only had 65 total yards rushing on the ground today. HN led the team with 11 carries for 30 yards. Following him was Jalen Wright, 2 carries for 17. Jeff Wilson, 3 carries for 14. Tim Boyle had a carry for 6 yards, and Alec Ingold had a carry for minus 2 yards. There was an instance where we were running the ball. I think it was with Jeff Wilson. I want to say it was a 4th down play, but I don't think it's a 4th down think it was like some sort of second down play. And Alec Ingold stopped mid-play. Thought there was a whistle. And me, as a viewer, had the audio on, could have sworn I heard a whistle as well. I don't know if the officials blew their whistles or whatnot, but if a player on the field, someone at home heard the same thing, thought the same thing, I get it. Played through the whistle, but this officiating crew just was not it. They just weren't. They weren't doing great. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks rushing attack. They had 23 carries for a total of 100 yards. Zach Charbonnet was leading that with 18 carries, 91 total yards, 2 touchdowns. He had the longest of 13, but aside from that, Dolphins were able to contain him a bit, but he also did have those slight gashes, big, 10-yard carries here and there. Average at 55.1. Kenny McIntosh had 3 carries for 11, and Geno Smith had 2 carries for -2 yards. Those were his QB kneels at the end of the game. All right, Miami Dolphins leading receiver Tyreek Hill with 3 receptions for 40 yards, but he had 5 targets, but there was one that was like a screen pass, and he didn't come down with it. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Like, maybe the blocks weren't there, but, like, get your hands on the ball. Like, it was just an abysmal showing. D.X. Ridge, a former Seattle Seahawks player, had 1 reception for 30 yards. HN had 3 receptions for 28 yards. Jalen Waddle, 4 receptions, 26. Julian Hill, 2 receptions, 24. Jonnu Smith, 2 receptions, 18 yards. Alec Ingold, 3 receptions, 16. And then Durham Smythe and Tanner Conner both got balls. And then in terms for the Seattle Seahawks, not an insane output by DK Metcalf in terms of receptions. He had 4 receptions off of 6 targets, but 104 yards. He had a long 71-yard touchdown. That was a tough one. Noah Fant, 6 receptions, 60 yards. Tyler Lockett, 5 receptions, 46 yards. Jackson Smith and Jigba had 3 receptions for 39. Zach Charbonnet, 3 receptions for 16. AJ Barner, 3 receptions for 13. And then we also have Pharaoh Brown and Laviska Shenault both had receptions, both under 10 yards. There was quite a few fumbles, as you saw in the highlight. Skylar Thompson had 2 fumbles, and luckily Armstead recovered 1. Jeff Wilson recovered 1, I want to say. If not, Alec Ingold's fumble was recovered by Jeff Wilson. And then maybe one of the other ones went out of bounds. Who knows? Geno Smith also fumbled the ball, but he also recovered it. In terms of defensive players, Jordan Poyer led the Dolphins in tackling with 9 total tackles. He had 5 solo. And then same thing for Jordan Brooks, but he had 3 solo, but he also had a QB hit. And then let's get into some key stats. We have Deshaun Hand with a sack, tackle for a loss, QB hit. Jalen Ramsey with 2 tackles for a loss. Kader Kohu with a pass deflection. Same thing for Zach Sealer, but he also had a sack, tackle for a loss, and a QB hit. Emmanuel Ogbo, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 QB hit. Kendall Fuller, 1 pass deflection. Calais Campbell, 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 QB hit, 2 QB hits, and a pass deflection. Jalen Phillips, 1 pass deflection, and a QB hit. That's it for the Dolphins. Key stats on defense. For the Seattle Seahawks, Rayshawn Jenkins was the leading tackler with 10 total, 8 solo. Shortly after him was Trice Wright with 6 total, 5 solo. He had a tackle for a loss as well. Then we also have Derek Hall with 2 sacks, 2 tackle for a loss, 4 QB hits. Terrell Dodson had a sack, tackle for a loss, QB hit. Julian Love, Dramont Jones, each had tackles for a loss, but Dramont Jones also had a sack, 2 QB hits. Jerron Reed had a sack, tackle for a loss, 2 QB hits. And same thing for Boy Mafe. Love that name. I just absolutely love it. Jonathan Hankins, 1 QB hit. Drake Thomas, 1 pass deflection, and then Tyreek Woolen, Reek Woolen had a pass deflection. So those are the key stats for the Seattle Seahawks defense. Kader Kohu had an interception return for 2 yards. Zach Sealer had an interception for no return. Quite a few kick returns, and the Dolphins actually had some decent yardage on these kick returns. Devon Achane, 1 return for 32 yards. Braxton Burrows, 1 return for 31. And then D.X. Ridge, 1 return for 28 yards. For the Seattle Seahawks, they had D. Williams, 1 return for 39 yards, and Laviska Shenault, 1 return for 19. Braxton Berrios, that punt return we talked about, showed in the highlight. One return for 44 total yards, not so bad for Braxton. D. Williams, 2 returns for 19 yards. Kicking stats, Jason Sanders went 1 for 2 with a long of 23. The one he missed was a 57-yarder. And then Jason Myers went 1 for 2 on field goals, longest of 56. And then that was on the first drive. And he went 3 for 3 on extra points. Punting, Jake Bailey had 6 punts for 277 total yards, 1 touchback, 3 were in the 20, longest of 53. Jake Bailey had 10 punts. There was an instance that Jake Bailey punted the ball like 3 times in a row. Michael Dickinson had 4 punts for 195 yards, 1 touchback, longest of 61. Now, all those stats out of the way, let's go over what my keys to victory were. Let's make it as easy as possible for Skylar Thompson. Now, how easy is too easy? Because they kept on trying to run these screen plays, and they weren't working, and they weren't connecting. Like, I get it. If you're running the screen plays, you're catching the ball, and you're getting 7 yards, 5+ yards each time. Shoot, do it, go ahead. But they weren't even catching the damn ball. So, do I want to blame Skylar? Do I want to blame the play calling? Do I want to blame the receivers for those type of plays? It just wasn't. It wasn't it. That was not the way to go about this matchup. On top of that, Skylar just looked like a deer in the headlights most of the game, and it was very unsatisfactory as a Dolphins fan to see that. Especially with the way the defense was playing. So let's get into the second key to victory, and that was make Geno's day hell. And I think the Dolphins made Geno's day hell. I mean, they were getting pressure on him. It wasn't equating into a ton of sacks and a ton of QB hits and stuff like that, but they were getting pressure, and they were making him unsettled in that pocket. There was a good amount of times that Geno had to roll out just to evade pressure and all this stuff. So I think the defensive line did their thing today. The pass rush in general was just really well. Zach Charbonnet, aside from that final drive from the Seahawks, he was having an okay day. He got a chunk of those yards in that final Seahawks drive because they were just grounding and pounding, trying to kill that clock. Aside from that, Dolphins did really well on defense. And the last one was don't let the atmosphere get to you. Kind of mixed feelings on that one. I think early on there was some instances that the atmosphere got to them. They were getting late to get lined up, and play clocks expired. Stadium's loud, and we're having to call timeouts. So you just eat the play, get the ball off, and then boom, Skylar Thompson's getting sacked in like 0.5 seconds. Like it just wasn't. It wasn't it. It wasn't it. That's my rant, pretty much. Moving forward, is Skylar okay? I hope so. I want to see more of Skylar Thompson. I want Skylar Thompson to be the guy leading the Dolphins while Tua's out, just because of the familiarity and his experience with this Dolphins organization. But if it has to be Tim Doyle with Tyler Huntley backing him up now, then so be it. This is very unfortunate. Hopefully Skylar's okay. It seemed like a rib injury. If I have any type of wrong information, let me know down below. But from what I've seen, it's all been kind of rib related to that big sack that he had taken just before he actually got taken out of the game for just that little pushover. But yeah, defense did their thing. Offense, there was some not so great play calling given the situations. And the overall play, the efficiency from our players just wasn't great. I wore this shirt. Tyreek getting locked up by Jalen Waddle. Tyreek was locked up. He wasn't having a great day. It just was a very subpar matchup for the Miami Dolphins. It's upsetting to watch as a fan, but you also got to have, realistic expectations. You're not going in there with QB1 Tua. You're going in there with QB2 Skylar Thompson. And he didn't perform well, and that was probably the main difference. And then aside from that, the play calling should have been more catered towards, getting H-hand, running the ball really well, which he was. So that was a little bit upsetting. But that is as far as it goes for the review. That's pretty much it. Dolphins have some recollecting to do. And then they have a matchup next week. I think this was a road game at, I want to say, no, it's a home game. Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans. So, it's going to hopefully be a revenge game because the Titans came back and beat the Dolphins last year. Man, oh man. It's just one thing after the other. It's not great right now. Hopefully the Dolphins can find a way to turn things around. You know, the Titans just haven't looked great. Will Levis is making very, very bad decisions. But we'll hear more about that later on this week when I do the game preview for that one. But if you made it to this point, thank you guys for watching. I'll catch you